to the phrase power dive.
Okay, this is a problem. After all that, I don't have.
Ready? Here we go. Yep, they're over here. You could come up through there. That's good. I'll feed it up.
Oh, you want to just keep it on there? Hey,
Get ready.
yeah.
Oh, you got it. Okay, I was gonna hand it up to you.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
All here. I would like to call the City of Albany Traffic and Safety Commission meeting to order. It's Thursday, September 28th.
Okay. Roll call, Robert Del Rosario,
Present.
Harry Chomsky,
Present.
Farid Javandel,
Present.
Ken McCloskey,
Present.
Chair Susan Reeves.
Present. First order of business, approval of minutes for July 27th, 2017. Any comments?
Approval of the minutes?
So is this is just for July, not the minutes you sent out for last week's special meeting?
No, we omitted those minutes in the agenda, so maybe we can put them on the October agenda for approval.
Okay.
I just sent it for reference because we're going to have yeah, I didn't
Okay.
put them
'Cause
for.
I did have some comments about that draft, but maybe I'll email them to you and
Yeah,
you can
email
send
them to
another
me.
draft before
Yeah.
you publish it.
Yeah, because we're going to bring them up in October.
Okay, good.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Great.
Who would second? Ken?
So it is now time for public comment for anything that's not on the agenda tonight. Sure, please come up to the.
Hello,
And-
my name is Danielle Wiedemann.
Great.
I'm a Albany citizen and a mother of a Cornell fourth grader. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm reading a letter written by Beth Zotter, another Albany mother, and we have signatures to support it. It's about the pedestrian safety improvements along Marin between San Pablo and Masonic. And we've worked with Aleida with this topic, so I'm going to read this letter generally and hope you'll listen. Dear Commission members, as residents of the neighborhood surrounding the portion of Marin Avenue between San Pablo and Masonic Avenue, many of whom are parents of children attending Cornell Elementary, we would like to take the opportunity to present our views regarding the safety of pedestrians crossing Marin. We are submitting our support and encouragement for the following safety improvements. We think these are critical to the safety of both kids and adults in our neighborhood. We would like to see funding of traffic upgrades proposed in the active transportation plan, in particular the installation of a highly visible pedestrian-activated flashing beacon between Cornell and Evelyn. We would like to see better coordination between police, schools, and civic groups in order to ensure 100% dependability of school crossing guards and reliable substitutes every day of the school year. In consideration of potential infrastructure improvements, we would like to note the following facts about the stretch of Marin. A pedestrian was fatally struck by a motorist at Talbot and Marin. This is the current location of the Cornell Elementary School crossing. 800 pedestrians cross the Marin intersections from Cornell to Evelyn on a typical day. A school building is a powerful visual cue for drivers to look for children. However, Cornell is invisible to drivers along Marin. Cornell is the only elementary school crossing along Marin that does not have a traffic light to ensure stopped cars. And currently, the improvements being made between San Pablo and stannage, for example, the bulb outs, does not include pedestrian-activated lighting. And so we'd strongly recommend that amendment made and added. So to improve the safety of children crossing on school days, we think the installment of rapid flashing pedestrian beacons is a crucial element of the traffic safety improvement plan. Because of the east-west orientation of Marin, the rising and setting sun can make pedestrian visibility very difficult for even the most careful drivers. Furthermore, our collective experience is that nighttime crossing is treacherous, since the headlights of oncoming traffic are all but obliterated the visibility of pedestrians, even when we are directly under streetlights. The installation of flashing beacons would represent a dramatic improvement in pedestrian visibility, both in the daytime and at night. So we are impressed with the plan put forward in the active transportation plan. And a group of us have already met and indicated our willingness to work with Ms. Aldeida and to provide more input from parents and other residents eager for our safer pedestrian crossing. And on that note, we'd like, since we have this opportunity, to incorporate better coordination with the crossing guard issue. So we include this issue because it is highly relevant to the safety of Cornell Elementary School crossing at Talbot. And it is an issue that affects all children attending Albany schools. Among the parents signing this letter include several parents who have served as PTA officers. And we have noticed that responsibility for crossing guards hiring and calling up of substitutes could benefit from much better coordination between the police, local schools, and other organizations to help coordinate a contingency plan in the event of absentees. The current solution of using on-duty police officers to serve as backup crossing guards is not reliable, nor is it a good use of police officer time. Regardless of the solution, a designated person within the city government to oversee this coordination would help tremendously resolve this fragmented nature of existing responsibilities. Thank you for taking our concerns into consideration.
Thank you very much. Any other comments for items not on our tonight's agenda? And have you submitted form? Yeah. We actually have our letter submitted. Okay, great.
Hi, my name is Jessica Cross. I'm also an Albany resident in the area near Cornell, and my older child goes to Albany Middle School now, and my younger child's still at Cornell, and walks to school every day, relying on the crossing guard. If we don't have crossing guards or another mechanism to ensure safety at that crossing at Talbot, he'll no longer be able to walk to school. We'll increase traffic down that street because we can only send him out if there's a guard there. Marin is very dangerous. As has been noted, there have been accidents, fatalities, and more near accidents than I can count, and the kids really can't be seen. So even a very responsible kid can't be allowed to walk unless we can count on there being a guard. Last year, there were guard absences over and over, and it was very hard to get a clear answer on who to talk to. So one thing I'd really like to emphasize that was in the letter is the coordination piece, because I feel there's the work on the street. There's the guard program, which seems to be the purview of the police department. There's the school district, which is responsible for the children and also has access to a emergency text message, which I think would be useful. If I could know there was no guard, I could take action. But so I'd like to see that kind of coordination to view the kids' safety getting to and from school across Marin as an overall city responsibility rather than, oh, this part is about traffic lights, this part is about crossing guards, this part is about this other thing, and rather see it all as one. I think we could do a lot better. And certainly I think we'd be willing to help in some way we could to make that happen. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments not on the agenda? Great.
My name is Richard Anderson. I live in the 1000 block of Stanage, and I'm here in support of increased pedestrian safety on Marin. And I have 3 suggestions that I think are practical and immediately available. First, with regard to the notion of a pedestrian-operated beacon, those are very important, as I'm sure everyone on the commission knows. Just at this time, with all of the work going on Marin, Galati Construction, I believe they're the electrical contractor involved, I would suggest that they could be directed to create an electrical service point in the junction box, preferably at Cornell. Now, that may be an increased expense for the current project, but I think it would reduce the overall expense of creating a beacon like that to take advantage of everything being open. 2 other things that have occurred to me. The most effective way to slow traffic is the presence of the police. Now, Marin is beautifully striped, and so is Gilman. Those are great assets. They work very well. But despite that, at rush hour, morning and night, there are cars that go way too fast, and those who have left the freeway, waited at the light at San Pablo, and then go coursing up Marin, appear to be in one large wolf pack and not particularly aware of pedestrians. I think that the police should be requested to have patrol officers parked frequently by the side streets in this area under discussion. I think it's been well demonstrated that drivers seeing a police car slow down, at least for half an hour, and particularly so if they see police cars in a certain area of town quite regularly. I think that could have a very salutary impact on the situation. Third thing I've noticed, I walk a lot around town. I walk after dark always, or excuse me, a lot, and pedestrians have to pay attention to having lights and protecting themselves. But I find the street lamps' effectiveness on Marin to be very limited. If you're standing on the sidewalk, you're nearly invisible. Now, this is perhaps a function of the candle power of the LEDs. Perhaps it's the projective capability of the lenses, which light the crown of the road beautifully, but do not really properly illuminate the crosswalk, which is where people are waiting to cross and where we had hoped drivers would look to get the sense that there is someone there and they should slow down. So thank you very much, and I hope you guys take this issue very seriously.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? For any matter not on the agenda tonight? Great. Thank you. So there are no comments on these for tonight, or is there any?
So I could probably add some context to at least 2 of the items brought up. First of all, with respect to the lighting on Marin, part of the project is we will be adding more lights, so that condition will improve. Second thing, as far as adding a stub out to provide for a future electrical service, the beacons that we would use, and I think we're in support of a beacon, are actually solar, so they don't require a stub out. So I know there was some discussion with the contractor, and I think they kind of went off and gave some information that wasn't entirely correct. So in terms of needing a stub out at this point, probably not necessary, and it isn't going to give us any advantage down the road. So there's nothing in my mind, that we could add to add future efficiency.
Great, thank you. Anything else to add? Okay. Thank you very much. Next up is the police report.
So if the commission will indulge either to push it further down the agenda, the information isn't on this particular computer, and while you're dealing with other business, I'll put it together, or we could do it at your next meeting. Either way. Push.
To the next meeting or
Down the agenda?
Yeah, I think we're interested in hearing it, but we can give you a little time. How's that?
If it's incomplete, we'll just look at what's available. It's fine.
Yeah.
We also, with the new format where we have cumulative data, it doesn't matter as much if we miss a month.
Yeah.
We'll get that information
was
in the end, so
Right.
I'd be open
Is
to
my,
waiting till October.
is my memory bad, though? It wasn't we didn't
We did
have
miss
it.
it last month.
Yeah,
We didn't
so
have
that's the
any.
only reason I'm a little
We have a
interested.
couple, 2 or 3 months worth of data, and it's just, I just need a few minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Been a hard day for Jeff. That's why I tried to.
I hear that. It must be like I don't know if it's a full moon, but it seems like it.
Well,
All right.
Something caused a dog to run on the BART tracks on the day of the worst freeway shutdown in the Bay Area. So.
An AC transit bus had an issue that same day, too. It's crazy.
That day was part of my excuse.
Yes.
I was sitting on the freeway.
Oh no. So we'll go to 6.1, request for accessible parking space at 925 Carmel Avenue.
Yes, we have received a request from a resident at 922 Carmel for a disabled or accessible parking space. It happens that 922 Carmel, it's in front of the sits in front of the speed hump. So while the resident of 922 Carmel said that he's not wheelchair bound and he wouldn't mind, since this parking space is open to everybody, we should really try to find the flattest area. So the neighbor at 925 Carmel, which is across the street, graciously accepted hosting of this parking space. And so I'm going to show you, this is basically a conceptual, layout of the blue zone with the sign. But there is another, I'm going to show you a plan. So here. So there is, the issue with this location is that it has a planting strip, 3 trees, and an East Bay mud box, and it doesn't have any pedestrian access. So what we are proposing is that 920, the owner of 922 Carmel, the requester, builds or installs a concrete pad, kind of like around this area where the box is, and bring everything to grade. This is here, the driveway. There's about 28 feet to the driveway at 927 Carmel. And that would be the about 20, it could be 20 to 22 feet of blue zone. So, he, Mr. Souza, has accepted, construction. He said he has to install it, and he will. And that's the condition for this approval. So I have another picture where I can show you the perspective, basically. So here is something that similar to a concrete pad. He will be needing this space in the future because of his oxygen tank that he needs to carry. And this particular block in between Solano and Marine gets really about very close to 85% parking occupancy at dinner time because of patrons of on Solano, for the Solano restaurant. So sometimes he has to park as far as Marine Avenue, and he has to walk, and it's very difficult for him to walk all the way to his house. So just basically across the street might not be that bad. So that's the request. I haven't received anything, any comments, any negative or comments in support from the residents, from the neighbors. I assume everybody, I talked to a couple of them, and they seem in agreement with the request. So, so far this is what we have.
We have questions?
Yeah.
So if on the plan view, if you take 20 feet to 22 feet, as you said, of the 28 feet of curb frontage, that leaves 6 to 8 feet for an additional vehicle?
No. There is a 20, let's see, where is that?
Oh, so it's right next to that. The
Yeah,
space
so
next to it
there is a almost 28 feet to the next driveway. So it's
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, it's basically a symbol to cut, to shorten the drafting.
My
Yeah.
So the 28 feet that's marked is indicating the width of the planted area rather than the width of the curb or the length of the curb?
No, we didn't continue the planting area. It's continue a planting area, and then that's
Okay.
one of the reviews that.
So the length of curb between driveways is 56 feet?
Yeah, it's 56 feet.
Okay, and when you drew it, is there a reason that you divided it into a 28-foot section? and another 20?
It was our intern that did that. I mean, I think
Okay,
it's just.
so there's no change of
No, no.
circumstance at that 28?
No, because
Okay.
it is to show, basically, this is the 925 Carmel. That's to emphasize that area. And then the other one is, I mean, it's not that it's concrete, but it's the same.
But from the point of view of somebody parking, it's just 56 feet, of which
Yeah.
20 will be taken up
yeah.
with the blue zone, and then there's plenty more.
Yeah. We usually, we would like to have the driveway on the back of the blue zone, but because in this case, the property owner of 925 agreed to host the parking space, we didn't want to go and Mr. Sosa didn't feel comfortable, asking other neighbors to. So this is, it happens that he agreed and it will work for him. If a wheelchair-bound person uses it, that person can use the driveway at 925, even though they might dismount on the driver's side, or if they dismount on the passenger side, they can use the pedestrian access to the sidewalk. That's the idea.
Just curious, is it a driver or a passenger that's requesting?
It seems that it could be both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're relying on the driveway as a ramp.
Yeah.
Are there any issues with the driveway? Does it meet specifications for the lip?
Probably not. But that's what we're doing on Solano Avenue. That's what we did remember when we installed those. I mean, just to.
Is it terrible, or is it?
No, it's not. It's not terrible. It's more or less.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
And a resident of 922 understands that this is a handicap parking space that's open to anyone
Yeah.
who qualifies for.
Yes.
handicap.
Yes. By the way, his car is parked in this picture. His car is parked there.
Okay.
In the picture that and I've been trying to find a picture that didn't have a car, but it's all the time his car is there.
Okay.
If you can see the license plate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
Originally I was a little bit concerned about the fact that we have the East Bay mud. But I looked around other areas, and there are sidewalks. I mean, the boxes are within the sidewalk, and as long as they're built to grade, and then that's something that we're going to work with him on this issue, that it has to be flat, then I think Mr. Hurley will issue an approval of the little plat there. Well, making sure that have a great
Right.
level, surface.
Well, we've seen on the sidewalk that as long as the lid is in good shape, the lids tend to get damaged before the rest of the box. And
That's true, yeah.
so as long as the lid's in good shape and it's level, then
And I will be asking him to keep an eye also on any kind of tripping hazard in that little area too.
well, isn't it true that those boxes are actually just kind of set in the dirt as a cap and access? And if it's not in good condition, it would be easy to replace it before it gets cemented in?
Yeah, yeah. Also, we have to notify East Bay Mud.
Any other questions from the commission before we open it up?
Yeah, one more. The driveway at 922 is not accessible for the owner. It looks like they do have a driveway, an active driveway.
But it's sunk,
Yeah, so it's
so it'd be hard to open the car doors on a large car.
okay.
Yeah, that's what he
Okay.
said. Yeah, I asked the same question back in April when I
Okay.
met with him.
And does 925 have to do anything to accept the construction? This is public right away, right? So
It's public right away. Yeah. They have a verbal agreement on that. So unless, we have not had this situation before. So, but I have to confirm maybe via email or that they agreed to this.
Any other questions? Okay, open it up to any public comment on this issue? No? All right, back to the commission.
I guess my only concern is having the designated space be on the wrong side of the street from the home of the person who needs it. And I mean, apparently the person said that that's okay with them, that they can negotiate the street crossing, but will that always be the case? Do we know if the person's condition is such that maybe in a year or two they will feel that they can no longer negotiate the street crossing and need a different solution?
That was my concern, but yeah, so I don't think he is concerned about that. I mean, he thinks that across the street is better than actually having to park on Solano or Marine to access his house, or at the corner to access his house, because walking is taxing for him.
You know, these are renewed on a yearly basis.
Right.
It's conceivable that it would need to change in the future, but it's hard for us to estimate how this person's health would change in the future. It's a big unknown.
Can you elaborate on it being renewed on a yearly basis?
Yeah, these permits are evaluated every year, and then I contact the person.
The blue zone is evaluated?
Blue zone,
Okay.
and contact the person and make sure that they're still using it.
And I believe the handicap categorization is reviewed on some base. Maybe it's not yearly. But, I mean,
placard, you mean?
for him to qualify is reviewed at some
Every 2 years, I think, for the DMV,
2 years.
and then we do it every year. I have to really turn back one space in Albany, in my experience here. One space has been turned back into a regular parking space.
I guess I think of these as, because they're open to the public that would have, and, there are handicapped people that go throughout our community, so, having these spaces is not a bad thing, because it might get a visitor in that neighborhood an easier place to park as well, so
Yeah,
and I do question, so if we were to ever turn it back, the only thing that's not turned backable is a public access across the green strip, right?
yeah,
Which is
so that will remain.
Okay,
Yeah, and anybody could use that to get into their car.
right, it's, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so they have to trim it. That's another condition.
Glad to hear it.
Or that they don't trim, or, yeah.
I move approval.
Second. Third second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No? We approve. You're back. You'll tell us when you're, oh, you're back. Oh, okay, good.
It doesn't matter, I'm sticking around for this, the other agenda item, so.
When would it be optimum for you to
Yeah.
do item
Yeah.
5.1?
Are we
Another
putting you
minute.
on the spot?
I
It's
have to
just,
connect to the screen, so there's another step.
so,
After the next agenda item.
okay, let's do that. So 6.2, approval of prioritization criteria for City of Albany sidewalk program.
First of all, I'd like to introduce one of our new team members. We have Razu Engen, who is about 6 months in? Almost 6 months? Not even 5 months in, and has been tasked with managing the sidewalk program, so he's done a bulk of the work. I'm just the front man, I don't know. And he couldn't make it last week, but is here today.
Great.
Switch this. So after our study session, I did go back and made a couple revisions. I don't want to go through all the detail we went through last year, but last week, but I want to hit a couple of the highlights. Again, let's see, are we gonna? There we go. What we're here to do tonight is approve the proposed criteria for ranking sidewalk repairs. This is part of the sidewalk program attached to the tax assessment that generates the income. And so part of the provision, actually getting to the next piece of the policy review, one of the provisions in the policy is that the Traffic and Safety Commission review and approve the annual list, and part of that is also the way we develop the list and is approving the criteria that helps us rank this. So this is what we're doing tonight. And as we reviewed last week, there's a number of things in the policy that give us a lot of, that line out what we do and give us a lot of flexibility. I want to highlight those. Our first part is, we want to replace sidewalks. We want to do it efficiently, and we want to do it quickly because this is a key thing for us. I spent probably more time than I wished this last week doing records requests around sidewalk tripping and so forth. So this is really acute for me right now, so we want to get going. Couple of things that are important, though, about the policy, and that it doesn't change the legal responsibility. So the homeowner is still, or the property owner is still responsible for maintaining the sidewalks out in front of or adjacent to the property. And then part of the program, we will be issuing the certificate of completion or compliance that makes it very clear that the property owner will be responsible for ongoing maintenance and repair of the sidewalks after it's repaired under this program. And then there's a lot of flexibility that's given in the policy for us to create a program that works well for the city. And then let me just jump down to the criteria. As we went through last week, we're proposing to do a number of groups, we've developed a list that's coming from a number of sources, and we want to rank this or group it into different groups, and then rank the different repairs within the groups. And the first group being those with special needs, and we think this is going to be a relatively small group. If someone calls up or gets in touch with us somehow and says, I have an accessibility issue, we're going to put them in group 1, and they're going to be the highest priority. And I think that was, from our discussion last week, we don't have any changes to that group. The second group, the B priority, would be those sidewalks within the priority sidewalk network within the active transportation plan. And I think we are in agreement that that's a good category for our second tier. But we're adding sort of some variation in there to make sure we're focusing on the most severely damaged sidewalks within that category. So we took the designation we have in group C and D, which is essentially breaking the network or or grading the creating two groups, one with including sidewalks that have offsets greater than 2 inches and some sort of structural damage that it can't be repaired or dealt with by concrete shaving or some other temporary measure, so it has to get repaired. And then the second one is the B2 group would be all those sidewalks that have a less than 2 inches, and then no structural, underlying structural issue. 'Cause again, that's tied to a being able to address the issue with a non-replacement method. So we've added that sort of gradation within the B category, and then that's mirrored again in the C and D category for sort of the remainder of the city. And then we have the E list, the E group, which is the special cases. This is, again, things that a sidewalk repair that anticipates a tree removal. We're not going to do that this year because I think there's a lot of ways we can deal with that. We don't want to take out trees. We're not ready to go down the alternate sidewalk material route quite yet. So we want to put those on a separate list so we can deal with them separately and on a sort of a different time frame, so we're not holding up the overall project. And then there was a lot of discussion about setting a lower limit. So we talked around that a little bit, and instead of setting a lower limit, I want to just have a lower tier. So I was concerned about, and if we say, hey, you don't meet the criteria, you can't be on the list, and then someone trips and falls on the one, we won't let them be on the list, and so I think we're trying to achieve the same thing by having a half-inch be sort of a lower threshold, and if you're at a half-inch or below in terms of offset or some minor cracking, we're going to put you in Group F, and if we've done everything else in the city, we'll start tackling Group F. And that's sort of how we would address that, rather than setting a lower limit as a threshold to getting on the list. And in some ways, that'll also give us an indication of where we think there are emerging issues. So if this is tied to a tree and it's a half-inch, a couple years from down the road, it's probably going to be more. And at least we'll have a starting point where we think our problems are. And then ranking within the group. So we're proposing to do a couple things. What we want to do is make sure we are working through things efficiently. So we want to be able to, like, let's say we have a single block and we have a couple of sidewalk repairs that are right next to each other. We want to be able to group those together and sort of rank those as a group rather than individual repairs. So we would develop our list. We would look where they are, try to group them logically, and then rank those groups. And within the Group A, Group B, Group C, my sense we would just do them randomly at this point to set up an initial prioritization, and then we would build off that as we go forward. Getting into the priority sidewalk network. So it's the green areas. This is the area that we've identified in the ATP. And we're going to focus on those areas and then branch out to the rest of the city. And in terms of developing the list, we're still proposing, our primary sources right now have been our prior studies, and then phone calls, emails, people who have contacted us. And we've also started our interns going out and actively surveying areas. And again, we're trying to figure out how long that will take and how that matches with our production on this. So we're gonna look at a number of things, including contracts, and we will keep our eyes out for robots that might do this too. So that's how we plan on developing the list. And I think, in my mind, I think there's things that we can do to use our website a little bit better in advertising this program, and we're going to look into that over this course of this year as well. Notification, I think we're going to do what we proposed last week. Once we do our, get approval on the criteria, we're going to go ahead and do our ranking, send out an initial letter to anyone on the list, letting them know where they are, what group they are in, and how we see this coming in, and giving an indication on timeline. We'll send that letter out initially, and then as we start breaking things into packages, and we're looking at doing $100,000 blocks, so we'll sort of estimate what we think would fit that 100,000, and if it ends up being 110 or 98, we're just going to go with it, and then we'll make a formal recommendation or the formal notification identified in the policy sort of at that time, and then that would come back to traffic and safety for the approval of that sort of $100,000 block. Let's see, and so that's sort of the overall list incorporating the comments. I did pull out some data from the last project that I think was asked for. Of course, I left the sheet, so I recreated it. So the last project, we went out with 58 locations, and that projected to be about 6,300 square feet of replaced sidewalk. We ended up completing 32 locations, and ended up the actual number of square feet replaced was somewhere on the order of closer to 5,000 square feet. So the interesting thing is, on the last effort, and this ties into the sort of the staffing sort of commitment to manage the project. One thing that was interesting for me going through looking at the projected versus the final, in most cases, the final was much larger than what we projected initially. So I think, and just on a rough level, we were looking at, about 100 square feet or 110 square feet per location, sort of in the planned. And then the actual, we're closer to 150 square feet per location. So hopefully the approach we're taking this year in developing an individual plat at each location will give us more detail and give the contractor more accurate expectation of the square footage at each location. My sense on the last project was that there was a lot of hand-holding and a lot of sort of designing in the field, which greatly increased the amount of staff effort in managing the contractor and dealing with questions out in the field. So to the extent that we can get a better set of plans up front, hopefully that will reduce the level of sort of hand-holding throughout the contract.
When you say square footage, are you saying that the actual distance or area on the flat?
Yes.
So it's not that, that it turned out there was a deeper hole.
No, it's
that they
square
went
foot.
further.
It's the
So
square
it's a
footage of
2D,
concrete.
It's not a 3D. Okay, great.
Yeah, it's a 2D.
Yeah.
Right.
And the reduction was caused by dollars? But you used up a certain amount of dollars when
I'm not
you hit
sure.
the
We
30.
didn't use up all the contract value. I don't know if we just were
Petered out.
jostling out. I don't know.
Right.
I didn't get to talk to Jocelyn and get a download, a real clear download. I did see some notes in the contract, so I don't know exactly why we cut it off. I think there were some issues with the contractor. I think there were, issues with the design and it just being a very, difficult project to manage, and we just needed to put an end to it.
What was the total at that end? Did you get that?
I think it was close to 130,000, I think.
Okay,
That sound about right? Okay.
okay.
Did you see a figure for how many of those involved trees?
That was noted. I don't have it with me. I know I think a lot of them dealt with root pruning, and I think they took out 2 trees. 2 trees.
It's not bad.
So Razu brought up a point about, did John, our forester, look at these? I think he didn't look at these going in. I think the tree was there a tree next to it? Not, there was no analysis done ahead of time to determine, what the right solution might be. So this year, what we're doing is having John go out ahead of time to sort of assess whether or not the tree would survive root pruning, and then make a recommendation to do both either root pruning or combination of root pruning and crown thinning if it's a significant amount of root pruning. So we're hopefully going to get a little bit more information up front that'll be a little more gentle on the trees.
Do you capture issues with the contractors? Like, you know that before you go back out to bid, or? I don't know if it works that way in government.
I don't think we can, it's a public bid, and to the extent that someone meets the licensing requirements and the financial requirements, I don't think we can exclude someone. That said, I think it's self-selecting. If you have a bad experience, it's a bad experience for both sides, and you try to avoid each other.
Okay, good, fair enough. More questions?
Can you go back to the prioritization page?
Yes.
So it is helpful to have group F there to clarify the lower threshold. I'm wondering, would it be accurate or would it change anything if you rewrote the description of B2 and D to include that, instead of just saying less than 2 inches, it would say between 1/2 and 2 inches?
That's a good point.
Is that exactly what you intended?
That's exactly
Okay,
what I
good.
intended, yes. Fair, I'll make that clarification.
For Group F, this is all for replacing the sidewalk, or would Group F, the shaving project, work for Group F? Or is shaving part of this at the very bottom?
So
The priorities.
reading the policy, I haven't pushed this very far, but I'm not sure if we're allowed to do shaving. I think it anticipates a solution, like a complete fix. At least that's what I'm doing this first time. And the homeowner or the property owner is absolutely able or willing to, they on their own can engage someone to do shaving and at a small amount, like a 1/2 inch, or it's not that expensive. So that's something they could do on their own.
In the process of creating this, I think the information we had was that shaving may or may not be appropriate depending on the age of the concrete. So it's not necessarily an expectation that you could do shaving on a small problem. It depends. So I think
Well, I remember
couldn't really
that.
address that in the policy.
I remember that shaving definitely shortens the rest of the length of the life of the pad, or could. I don't know what conversation that was from. It might not have been here, but. More questions?
I just have a process question. So are we approving the prioritization, and then is that going on to the city council, or is the list going to go on to city council later, or what? How's that all going to work?
So my anticipation is you approve the criteria. The criteria won't go to city council, but when we present the list, the first $100,000 block, we'll discuss the criteria and how we arrived at that list. And so it will be embedded in the approval, the next step to council, but that'll come through you first.
So for the $100,000 bundle or whatever group, we first approve it and then it goes to city council for the final approval. Okay. I have a weird question that I don't know if it's appropriate. So what occurred to me is the Carmel, the prior 6, whatever, on the Carmel. Are we sure that the sidewalk's prepped for this? But he's going to get out and go across the street. But it occurs to me that in this, now that we have this sidewalk thing, when we're talking about projects,
The sidewalk looks not as bad, maybe not perfect, but maybe you asked about the driveway. I think that's more of an
more of a concern. Okay, I just.
This might be a Group F. You know.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Okay. It looked kind of okay from the picture, but I couldn't tell. I just think maybe we should be mindful of that when we touch
Just from
them.
this picture, it looks better than some of the other ones we have.
Okay.
I mean, we really need to go out and look at it, but
Okay. Sorry, I kind of took us out there. All right, so
Yeah,
I'm so
public comment.
sorry. Public comment. Open for public comment. Please come up. And it's a 3-minute limit, which I haven't been saying.
I just have a question, really, and that is just what your time is for this to start. And then I have a suggestion in general for when you're looking for, you mentioned you have interns, that you find a high school teacher who would have a class who might go learn something by looking at streets. That's all.
okay.
May I have your name, please?
So on time, so we're anxious to go as quickly as we can. From a sort of a process perspective, we would have, assuming we got everything done and we're in a position to come back to, the earliest we'd come back to traffic and safety would be the October meeting. Then, assuming everything went well there, we would go to city council and then out to bid. So in all likelihood, we would be constructing early part of 2018. And that's, in some ways, once we get up and going, it'll go quicker, but I think we're still sort of working through the list right now and getting our process set up.
So we talked about this a little bit last week, so at some point it would trigger, as we kick off this first bundle, at some point, we won't wait till the very end of that to kick off and work for the next bundle, correct?
I think we would try to, in my mind, we'll see if Razu jumps over the fence here, but the idea to kind of get this on a rolling thing, that we get something out similar to what we do on the sewer projects and so forth. Once we get something out the door, we start working on the design for the next one. And we're not just doing one thing at one time, so we'll keep going. And the nice thing about having programmatic funding is that we could be spending some design money one year to design the project that we're going to construct the following year, and it's not so much fiscal year dependent on, we know that money's coming in, so we can make some plans of and just get into a rhythm of projects. So we would anticipate once we do the prioritization, sort of a mass mailing to everybody and let them know where they are. And then as it comes in, have a more detailed notice as the package is coming up. We've also thought about, once we do this, to some sort of posting on our website or something, but we haven't thought through all that quite yet.
Any other public comments? I don't think so. Back to the commission. Comments? Thoughts?
Just on the, reiterate what I said last week, just on the outreach. It looks like you're thinking it through, but just based on the comments that we have heard, both at this meeting and the last, that there's some excitement and anxiousness, right, about, okay, well, what's going to happen with this tax that we passed. And so it's great to have the notifications for those that will be getting improvements in the first package and second package and so on. But even somehow listing the after they get approved, but listing the criteria for the city to see either in the newsletter or on the website. Well, one, let everyone know that we're doing stuff, but two, it'll also let people be aware that there is this opportunity, especially if they have special needs, to call in.
Right, and I think, like, reading through a lot of things on the Public Works website, there's probably some cleaning up that needs to happen. A lot of this is rolled over from the old site, and I'm not exactly sure of when it was scrubbed, but we got a lot of things that were kind of pushed through. But I think that's worthwhile to redo what we're saying there and focus on the criteria that we have, how we're moving forward, and how to get on the list. And if you do have special needs, call us and we'll help you out and so forth.
Right. I think the criteria are looking good. Thanks for responding to our requests.
Appreciate it.
I think it's clearer, if a little more complex, but clearer. And, I think you got to roll with it and see what happens, and then we'll work out the bugs next time. It's.
Great. Motion? Anybody else have comment?
I'm happy to make a motion.
I have one comment just based on your comment. I think it's an excellent idea to get some high school students maybe to do some measuring to help, because the issue is we have several different pieces of information, but a more comprehensive view could help for this, certainly for the second bundle. We don't want to hold things up now, but any other?
You're going to make a motion for it?
All right.
I move that we approve the prioritization criteria and associated public noticing process.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No.
All right.
All right. Great. Item 6.3, sugar sweetened beverage tax.
Or is
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or your choice.
I'm so sorry. No, we
Ready to go
we
first.
had you rush to do it.
One.
Doesn't go ahead.
Do you want that one over there?
Yeah, I'll be okay.
Maybe it knows you're tall, so. Oh, wow.
So as the time period in the data gets longer and longer, PowerPoint gets more difficult to handle. So switching over to an Excel format
Yeah.
and then putting it in PDF form. So starting with the graphs, this is the collisions per month for auto versus pedestrian and auto versus bicycle. The brownish color is bicycle and the bluish color is auto versus pedestrians. And then the solid lines are the month-to-month raw data, and then the dotted lines are trend lines. As you can see, overall, the trend is pretty stable for both these types of accidents. Oops.
Too much.
The last few months, the new data that you're seeing is June, July, and August of 2017 is the new information that we're presenting to you tonight. So nothing jumping out to me, at least, in terms of the recent months. Basically averaging, now approaching one bicycle accident collision a month and 0.7 or 0.8 pedestrian incidents. This is vehicle collisions. The top blue one are the total number of collisions, and then the gray one is the injury accidents. So you can see overall trend for vehicle collisions is it's nice to see that declining a little bit, down to about 10 per month. These are accidents that are reported to the police department, accidents that the police department responds to. Injury accidents, the trend line looks nearly flat at about 4 a month. next, this is the trend line for citations. Obviously, it's declining for this time period. If we're going back to 2015 to 2017, there's a clear trend line of a decline in the number of citations. Although if you kind of break up the time period into two parts, the last 9 to 12 months look pretty stable, and it was the early part, it was 2015 and 2016 where we were getting information of more than 100 citations a month frequently, and now it looks like we're in the range of 80 to 100 for most months. And then finally, this is the DUI arrests, and this has been generally declining until this most recent data. I think anecdotally, at least, I've heard of the idea that Uber and Lyft are making a big difference in people making the right decision not to drive. But there were obviously some spikes this summer that are captured in the data. The trend line does continue down, but something happened in July that people were out driving when they shouldn't have been. And that may just be an aberration of the data, and that was, particular enforcement program or, who knows? We don't have the insights into the particular incidents that lead to the arrest. And if you're interested, I could pull up the actual data table too, if that is helpful to you.
Given time, it would be interesting to know, correlation with events around town or holidays and locations of citations, but that's probably not as easy to.
Yeah, I think that would be harder for I'd have to see how their database reports come out. What we can do using Switter's data is look at locations of accidents. It's not exactly the same database, so the numbers won't match, and a couple of years ago, I think we kind of took a little bit of a deep dive into that data, and at some meeting soon, we should revisit that, and you can see there are 20 or 30 pieces of data for each accident, including location. If I recall correctly, it's not a big surprise. Most of them are on Buchanan, San Pablo, and Solano, but I think predominantly San Pablo has the most accidents, and Marin.
It seems like a more interesting piece of information would be where the residents are.
Need to get her to go.
Yes, it's mostly
Just so that there's the people who are, for questions, better come to the podium because we're being broadcast and you can't.
Recorded.
The question or the comment was that it would be interesting to see the residents of the people who are being arrested to see whether there's some correlation and where they live to their driving behavior. And I'm sure the police department has that information on individual incidents. I don't know how they track the data, whether that's an easy report for them to generate for us or not.
What is the accident data,
Switters,
Switters?
state, I don't remember. Do you remember the acronym? stands for?
Weighted traffic.
Okay.
Which is publicly available information if you want to kind of,
You can request a report online.
through the California Highway Patrol.
Okay.
And you give them your email address and something else, and you can get access to it.
I don't know, do you recall the other website that already has a map is the TIMS, UC Berkeley Transportation Center. They have collisions database, and then they can give you the map and everything. I think you have to register, and also you have to let them know how you're going to use the data.
Interesting.
Any other questions, comments?
One question, which you may not have the answer to, but if the police department has any observations, I'd be interested to hear. The DUI, I assume that's across all forms of impairment. So it's not just alcohol, but other medications or other drugs,
Substances.
whatever it might be.
Are you dancing around a particular substance?
Well, there's at least one substance that has become more readily accessible. So just curious about that. And I've heard, haven't had a chance to look into it yet, that some states, Colorado, for example, have started to see trends associated with that, where now the legislation is kind of following along and coming up with the equivalent to the open container law, which sounds rational, but just
That's a really interesting question. I will ask the police department if they are able to track that, or if they just have some general observations.
So I think this is a very interesting way to look at it, and I don't know if you have an opportunity to share it with them, but I think it, especially the citation, trend and everything, I think would be an interesting thing for them to see over time in this format. So I appreciate that you put it this way.
You're welcome, and thank you for your patience this evening as we switch things around.
So you're saying you're not actually using Switters to generate, to gather this information, you're using some other source?
The information is provided to us by the police department using their database.
Okay.
you would not otherwise have anything from Switters past like last December or something. I mean, Switters lags because they have to collect from all the agencies in the state, process it, and last I heard, they're still doing it by hand, not electronic reporting, so it's slow.
Okay.
Albany PD is much more timely in getting us the data we want to see.
All right.
And even when you have the data for both this data and the Switters data, the numbers don't quite match, and I'm not quite sure why things might be here. Maybe how it's recorded by the state, or I don't know. They don't match. So you might see 10 accidents here, and you go to Switter and you see 8, and I'm not sure anyone understands why it's different.
Good.
My only other comment is that I'm not sure that the description police report isn't a real good descriptor for what we're doing here. Obviously, the data comes from the police, and that's great, but if somebody uninformed saw the agenda, maybe there's a better way to describe it.
Good point.
Okay.
Traffic incident report. Because it needs to.
Would it be Albany Traffic Incident Report?
Traffic incident report.
Because we're not going any further than that.
Needs to encompass citations and collisions, which are different things. Both incidents.
Having said that, I do miss having the police here from time to time to answer questions that we have about how they deal with certain situations, and that's been productive in the past, and I kind of miss that.
I'll pass that on to the police chief, and perhaps we can arrange something where they have perhaps a more wide-ranging interaction with you rather than just kind of. Historically, it's been kind of focused in on here's the data, and that's all. And I know you have a wide range of interests about how they do traffic enforcement.
Well, yeah, I mean, if they were here and we had this data, I'm sure our questions would be a little bit different than we were when it was just reporting on the last month. So maybe it's not every time, but certainly would be welcome to come back periodically, and so we could kind of look and dig into something a little bit deeper.
One thing that I'd like to see added to this particular graph would be a notation of when there were particular efforts to do DUI sweeps.
Yeah, and they could,
like those funded.
yeah.
Yeah, that's both DUI and some of the traffic enforcement programs are special grants from the state, and we could have an extra officer on duty who's just writing tickets all day.
Yeah.
And that's probably why some of those months have big spikes. It's not that people are better or worse drivers, it's just there are more officers.
Right.
And it also is affected, frankly, by our ability to retain officers who hire and retain officers. It's a constant challenge for them to keep fully staffed. And while traffic enforcement is very important, they also have calls for service that they have to respond to, and sometimes they're going one call after another, and they're not writing as many tickets as
Well, and they have to be the different ways they measure. I'm not going to remember what they are, but they have to be qualified on the various devices, and they're not all qualified on the most efficient device, which I can't remember what that was.
So,
Right, so not only do they have to bring people on, but they have to train them and keep them
right,
trained.
or they can't,
And then
yeah.
there's a balance of staff on duty at any one lots of variables.
Lots, but,
And by the way, they're subbing for the crossing guards.
yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
If we brought a police officer in for discussion, would it be wide-ranging enough to include topics like parking enforcement?
Sure. I don't see why I think it would probably want to have the chief or one of the lieutenants who have the knowledge across the whole spectrum of police operations, but I wouldn't see why we couldn't do that.
I've engaged in the past with the chief and his staff about this, and they've requested that what they prefer is that we give them a heads up as to what we want to talk about. That way they can send the appropriate staff who is prepared to talk about what we're interested in talking about as much as possible. You know, they understand it. Things come up. But, for example, if we know we're interested in talking about parking enforcement, then it's only fair to let them know.
But does that mean that we as a commission have to discuss it at a public meeting and decide what we want to ask them first, or do we just each individually tell Aleda what we're thinking of asking and then?
I think you can just individually send us an email, and we'll make sure that the representative who's here has got the information to answer your questions.
So when we find out that it's agendized for the police to show up, would that be the appropriate time for us to respond and say, oh, by the way, since the police are here, I'd like to ask about such and such?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good. Well, I think if they saw this beforehand too, it would help them. And then them know that the other thing that would be helpful on all of these graphs is if there were any of the opportunities.
Special enforcement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they could that I'm sure it's a date summary somewhere that they might even be able to send you so we could see it all together at one time. But,
I'm sorry, I don't know how their
Yeah.
data is
Okay.
maintained.
anything?
The slide before, Jeff. It'd be, I think I asked this last time, but it'd be interesting to know what the decrease in citations should correlate with. And maybe
Yeah.
that's a question for when the police.
That's a pretty striking one.
Right. And so you would hope either speed is slower on San Pablo or whatever on our main streets, or why are they giving less citations? Are they less staffed? But yeah, it's interesting that because you would hope that you would have the accident data maybe correlate, but there's just so few samples that it's probably hard. But maybe there's something else that shows, okay, we're giving less citations because people are following the law more, and I don't know how you could see that, but maybe that's a question for the police when they come over here.
Well, I think that jumps out
Yeah.
of needing a good explanation, if there is one, and it may just be kind of a.
Good. Thank you
You're welcome.
for the work.
Jeff, offline, I'd love to talk to you about visualization of data. I spent a long time working for a biotech firm, and I have some suggestions that might make it more clear. Not that it's not clear, but it could be more.
Good. Now, 6.3 sugar sweetened beverage tax advisory body recommendations.
Yes, this is before you because to refresh your memory, the City Council placed on the November 2016 ballot a measure that would impose a tax on sugar-sweetened beverages. The voters of Albany approved that, and that tax is now being implemented, and the collection the collection of the revenues is starting to come in. The estimate from our consultant is that there will be approximately $223,000 annually. Although I don't think we've actually gotten enough revenue in to be able to confirm that estimate yet. It's kind of I understand it's kind of a convoluted process to actually get the check in the mail. The part of the measure that was approved by the voters and now in the municipal code calls for advisory commissions to make recommendations to the city council on how the funds might be spent. The recreation department discussed this at their meeting recently, and they came up with a number of things that would be, kind of parks and recreation related, as you might expect, including classes about healthy nutrition and exercise, and fitness-related activities, and then having some sort of a health expo kind of event, and also doing things, making improvements to parks, were some of the ideas that city staff presented to the commission. I haven't had an opportunity to go back and listen to that meeting yet to see if the commission themselves added anything to that list. So this is just kind of a little bit of a brainstorming session for you. If you have any ideas that you think the city council ought to take into consideration that would be more in your venue of transportation-related things to use the money that would help improve the health of Albany residents.
Two questions. One, were there any restrictions on the allocation when this tax passed? So it's spend wherever.
Because of the nature of the tax.
Oh, right. So it's a general excise tax.
It was, I believe, a general tax.
Right.
So technically, no, although I think the notion behind this is that there should be some nexus between the collection of the tax and the idea that we're doing this to help improve the health of the community.
Okay. And then the second question is, presumably there's going to have a diminishing return, right, over time?
We hope. It's kind of that the people choose, and I think that's already happening.
Is it? Okay.
In just nationwide, people hopefully are drinking a little bit,
Yeah.
eating and drinking a little bit more healthy. But yes, the idea would be the combination of awareness and increased costs will decrease the use of these sweetened drinks.
I only bring that up because that oftentimes happens with taxes of any type where the returns, if you don't track them, either they haven't kept up with escalation or whatever it may be, and then you're trying to fund a program, and then 5 years from now you can't fund that program anymore because the dollars are less or they're not worth as much.
Yeah.
Other comments?
So I'd be interested in helmets.
Should we take public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, questions now, right? Anybody else?
Okay.
I thought this was just sort of a brainstorming. Right.
Yeah.
So we're bringing it back to the commission now? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So I can offer an opinion?
Now we're bringing it back to the commission, so you
You know, I
can
have lots
offer
of opinions all the time. Right, so there's still, despite the fact that helmets are available chiefly from the fire department for, I think, $11, and for $25 to $30 from Target and other retailers in the area, the APAL Bike Rodeo happens only once a year in most years, not every year, but most years. And they give away helmets on the order of probably about 100 each year. There are still kids out and about in Albany who are not wearing helmets for whatever reason. When I attempt to engage with those families, often acquiring the helmet seems to be an issue. The kids have outgrown helmets, they've destroyed helmets. I think it would be valuable to both encourage active exercise with scooters and skateboards and bikes, and possibly offer discounted or free helmets, along with a program of education, hopefully. We're also thinking about redesigning the streetscape on, we're intending to redesign the streetscape on Solano Avenue. Perhaps we should think in terms of drinking fountains or water bottle filling stations. Because not only do we, we want to help people avoid sugary beverages. I would also prefer to help people avoid buying bottled water. We have some of the best piped water in the world.
Great. Good. Other ideas?
What is the status of the funding for the crossing guards, and do they have other strategies for that?
I haven't been closely involved with the crossing guard issue, but that I think is certainly a consideration that would be appropriate.
What's the deficit again? It was 500,000? Well, how much?
Well, I believe
Oh, I'm off.
the amount that UC had funded before was
Yeah.
38,000.
38,000. Okay, and then that was half of it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The historically, there have been 6 part-time crossing guards. 3 of them were funded through the contributions from UC Village, and that funding has gone away. Presently, we have 5 right now, 5 crossing guards, I understand. And that's being funded through other sources temporarily, just while we're working through this issue.
Yeah. That's my idea.
What about funding for our Safe Routes to School goals, which may not have a particular grant yet? Are there ideas that we have about improving walking routes to schools that are waiting for funding?
That's good. That's a good idea too, and especially right now that we have the last $30,000 of funding for school safer school activities. I think we still have for this year, but once this funding goes away, it's a matter of I have to really apply for another infrastructure grant and then get the educational component. It would be really good also to have some activities funded by these source of funds. The bike program during PE is very popular.
4th and 5th grades.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then for also there are 2 events in the year, which is the International Walk and Roll to School Day in October, and also the Bike to School Day in May, which
But
is
the
associated with
big
the bike.
expense is really the Ride Your Bike program in PE.
Yes, that's the one of the
And that's
largest.
the one that we don't have a solid ongoing source of funding for.
That's right, yeah,
So that's a great point, Harry.
great idea.
And how much is that one? Around?
It's about, well, right now we have a program that goes like 5,000 every time that we have this program in school, but we have it every 2 years, and we rotate the schools, and usually have contracts of 17,000, 18,000 or 20,000 depending on the number of hours. So
So it's a 2-year contract for
right now that's what
about
we have.
18.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 year for 18.
Each elementary school gets it every other year, so they alternate.
Yeah. So that covers about, I would say, 3-4 schools. I mean, in the contract period. It's every 2 years. Something.
Are there other projects in the ATP that are awaiting funding?
Well, we do have. Well, I'm going to talk later about the bike share and other things that we're really thinking about. So maybe we can actually associate that funding to that.
Yeah, we'd like to, for projects that we can get outside grant money for, even if we have to compete and maybe we don't get it right away, we still want to use the outside. We like to use other people's money.
Yeah.
And so if we want to do programs that we know we're not going to get from other grants, or that we're pretty sure it's going to be a long wait, then that might be a good use. I can't think, right now we have plenty of projects queued up. We just need, in a sense, the time to get them done almost.
I thought about a commuter bike credit, like a pre-tax type of benefit for employees who bike twice. I mean, that's for the city, so it might be but I don't know.
I mean, for city staff.
City staff, but maybe we can expand it in like maybe the school district and other employers in Albany. I'm gonna start. I know that Berkeley has a commuter benefit program. Is that right?
Yeah, but it's not a question of the city funding things. It's about education so that people can use the available tax benefits that are associated with commute benefits. So,
So it's actually a federal tax benefit
yeah.
Yeah.
that everybody has
Right.
anyway.
But maybe educational materials or some kind of like promotional materials can be. I mean, that's not a large expense, but at least something that we can use with that fund. So.
There are some incentive programs, speaking of Safe Routes to School, that we haven't been practicing in Albany. There are some programs that help encourage kids to regularly bike to school. That's been an issue here because we haven't had the rack space in many cases to do that. That situation may be changing, especially at the middle school. So there might be an opportunity. There's a system that requires a little initial investment that has a tower, and kids carry RIF cards. And so their trips to school are recorded anonymously, basically, and in such a way that the data is not really attached to them. But through linking themselves to the number, they can get prizes, and they're, so it's an education and encouragement program. And that may become more important as the new campus at the middle school is built out. It would be great to reduce the congestion at pickup and drop-off time.
Oh my gosh.
Especially as the campus enlarges physically, if not number of students.
And does the high school have a bike cage?
No. The high school, as a matter of fact, recently had some 7 bike racks added for about 14 additional spaces. There are 3 sets of racks now, some located in the middle of the school area behind the main building, some near the little theater, and then basically the pool bike racks get used as overflow for the high school, which is fine. Certainly those are more in demand after school and on weekends, so I think it's a good balance.
I put down enhanced lighting. I don't know if we have sources for lighting, but I think it keeps coming up, and does for me, and it helps, exercise and make it safer. So, and then I keep hearing about the crossing guard issue, and I think it would be an interesting, what we don't want to have is the kids that currently walk stop walking. We need more kids walking. So, yeah.
And how about things like these rapid flashing beacon that the parents,
Yeah.
something like that
Yeah.
we didn't include in this phase 3
Yes.
of the project, but we included in a Safer School, but this can be implemented without the other Safer School project. We need to conduct some warrants, but I'm sure that we might be able to meet them.
Is Berkeley still installing flashing?
We are.
beacons? Yeah. And in pavement, the Santa Rosa
In-pavement lights are horrible. We don't
Yeah.
do those. They
Okay.
get far too easily damaged. We
Yeah.
don't have too many years of data on the rapid flashing beacons, but between the ones that get knocked down or otherwise our maintenance burden, we're figuring that a typical installation is $50,000, and you'll probably spend that amount again within 10 years. So the 10-year life cycle cost on them
Yeah.
is $100,000 per installation location. That's multiple lights in each location, but you want to
Yeah,
make sure
yeah.
that you have a robust crossing.
Sure.
But that, certainly is something that's eligible.
Yep.
Along with lighting, an education campaign perhaps with reflective giveaways about wearing light-colored clothing. Most fashion seems to be dark, but that's really not helping. So there's a mindset that people, when you're outside of a car, it's much easier to see. Your eyes are adjusted differently than when you're inside a car.
Yeah.
And people really don't get the difference. They don't understand that they're basically invisible until their legs pass in front of somebody else's headlights. And it's
We try to impose a tax on dark-colored clothing.
oh man.
Only at night.
No, I said an education campaign. Now, let's not. We're encouraging. We're informing. We're providing tools to help, like reflective leg bands, possibly. Or armbands. Let's keep it positive.
So we've talked about a lot of things. Do we need to prioritize them to have more power or punch to them, or?
I don't think so. I think I'm not directly involved with the administration of the soda tax, so I'm not exactly sure how the council is going to get this information. But we can certainly capture what you've talked about tonight, and in whatever form it needs to be presented to the council, we'll make sure that that gets part of their staff report. And I think they're going to they're required to hold a hearing on this at some point this fall. I don't know that we have a specific date in mind yet, but they will be discussing this.
So it's not like there's another committee or commission who's sort of massaging this and then presenting to them? It's a staff level thing?
Well, the three commissions that are reviewing it are Social and Economic Justice, Parks and Rec, and Traffic and Safety.
Okay.
And then, yes, we'll collect all these comments and have that go to the city council.
I guess my only comment really, other than I'll mention a few of the ones that I've heard already, is, as you said, the nexus with public health. Seems like that's a very appropriate thing. And a lot of what we're talking about, the reason that it ties to public health is, for example, the crossing guards to support walking to school, the bike helmets to support biking to school and safety. I think anything supporting active transportation from our perspective, or at least mine, is something that does support public health. So, yeah, I think I mentioned I like the bike helmets, I like the crossing guards, the rapid flashing beacon if we can't get a grant for it, but we can spend, I think, really a disproportionate chunk of the money on something like that, where we might get more benefit with some of the other things. And the bike rack expansion at schools sounds like something that's worth looking into, especially if the high school doesn't have a bike cage. Maybe that will encourage a few more people. But again, you'd have to have an expanded area. I know the middle school bike cage is full to overflowing.
They're working on that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I lost. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think sensitive to what Robert pointed out in that the funding, whatever we assign to it, if it gets too married to it, that's the only a concern I have with the crossing guards. It's like,
Exactly.
that's an ongoing need, but maybe this would help while we transition it into some kind of planned support. But it worries me to put it in there and then have that dry up too, because that is an important need, unless we can find a robot to do it. Like, it's possible. Who knows?
Well, it's interesting. What's the life of the tax?
Oh, yeah.
10 years?
Oh, it's not forever?
Well,
Reconsider in 10 years. Hopefully we won't need it then, but yeah.
I'm sorry?
Hopefully we won't need it as much by then, which is exactly the point.
Well,
that
yeah.
if we're trying
Yes,
to change
right.
behavior.
So it may tail off, but yeah.
point.
So assuming it's 10 years. It's my understanding from talking to staff that many grant funding opportunities are focused on sort of new things. So maybe, we should, and staff is probably doing this already, focus on things that aren't likely to get grant funded otherwise, or because they're not necessarily new, or they're sort of out of the box and don't fit the requirements. And actually, if it is 10 years, then a small expenditure on a regular basis for 10 years for something that is ongoing might be the appropriate kind of thing to target. Helmets, education, as opposed to infrastructure or one-time expenditures. We could also look to community groups and the Safe Routes to School program to partner on these things. One of the advantages of the Safe Routes to Schools programs is that it's a national program. They're sort of vetted programs that are easy to latch onto and can cut down on sort of the trial and error.
Okay. Anything else you need from us?
I think this is great. Thank you very much.
Good. Announcements and communication. 7.1, brief update on San Pablo Avenue and Buchanan Street Pedestrian Improvements Project design.
Great. So on September 21st, we had our first technical advisory committee meeting and to present 35% plans, and Farid Javandel and Ken McCloskey attended. It was a very good meeting overall. We discussed the different. I didn't bring the plans because we're going to present the plans in October. So we discussed a lot of aspects of the project, including the bulb outs, the medians, the need sometimes to keep the left turn open on San Pablo Avenue, the Buchanan Marine Merge. It creates a pocket park, and the challenges we face also on San Pablo Avenue with drainage, and our original idea to create a rain garden, for instance, it's challenged by the creation of bulb outs, and also by the existing drainage patterns or system that San Pablo has is a valley gutter. There's no underground pipeline, and it will become very, very costly to have more rain gardens. We're exploring the area, the gateway area by El Cerrito, city of El Cerrito, to have a more like gateway, nice welcome to Albany feel. And the landscape sub-consultant is actually working on some conceptual designs, placeholders for a nice art piece for later. The arts committee can actually work on a nice welcome to Albany monument or sculpture. Also, this Buchanan Bikeway, this project includes a pedestrian hybrid beacon by Taylor, and will facilitate that crossing at Taylor, which is very dangerous right now. And we'll have the tweaks that we missed to implement with the Buchanan Bikeway phases 1 and 2. That will include adding widening the curb ramp that actually lands where the bikeway lands to the Buchanan Bikeway, extending the crossing, the bicycle crossing on piers, and creating a nice plaza, better plaza than the concrete that we have there right now. So basically enhancing the wayfinding signage that we have there. The other thing that we're coordinating with AC Transit as well. So, and with Alameda County, the Alameda County Transportation Commission that has started its San Pablo Avenue corridors study. It's a very, very large and very comprehensive study of San Pablo Avenue from Jack London Square to Hilltop. Hilltop? Yeah, Hilltop.
Wow.
And analyzing if a real bus rapid transit could be feasible, and what other alternatives for transit and for active transportation San Pablo Avenue across these cities may have. So we're working very closely with them, and we'll bring you the plans next month. We're going to receive, also we're working very closely with Caltrans as well. So we have something called a peer review process. And we're about to schedule our second meeting in October, most likely. So it's a very involved project. It has so many stakeholders, and we are planning to present the plans, particularly on the park-related concepts, to Park and Rec on the October meeting, and also to maybe November meeting to the Arts Commission, because of the art opportunities, the art placement opportunities that this project will bring. The other thing that I would like to share with you is that we're going to coordinate with Jeff our walkthrough or contacting the businesses on San Pablo Avenue to show the plans, make them understand how the medium will work, the areas that we're going to have access to, and those kind of like, it seems a little bit hilly right now, but I think we're going to go work through it. That's my report. Any questions? Or any additional comments from the TAC meeting?
No, that was good.
You didn't bring up Washington Avenue, which is one of the more challenging areas.
Something I said. That's right, yeah. So Washington Avenue, it's this project actually, it's more oriented to pedestrian improvements, with the exception of the crossing of San Pablo at Washington Avenue, which is a bicycle boulevard, both sides, east and west side of San Pablo Avenue. That is a challenge, a design challenge. They provided, the consultants provided two concepts. One is having a bike lane, on the west side of San Pablo, between the two staggered legs of Washington Avenue, and the ability for cyclists to ride on the sidewalk on the east side of San Pablo. So
Which
that was
happens now.
right.
It's formalizing that.
Right. And the other idea they brought about is the something similar to Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. I've seen pictures, and I've actually seen a video online. I've never been there, but you've been there, yeah. So it's in the middle. It's basically in the middle, which eliminates a left turn from southbound San Pablo onto eastbound Washington. So that is a traffic impact.
That was one of the early designs we had for Monroe and Dartmouth, right?
Yes, that was. So it occurred to us during the discussion that why don't we bring that same concept of the UC Village cycle track to this area of San Pablo Avenue between the two legs of Washington. And they actually, looking at the plans, they said, might be possible, especially because the west side of San Pablo only has three official parking spaces. So the removal, the loss of parking space, the parking stalls would not be so significant.
Wouldn't the cycle track have to be on the east side in this situation?
No, not necessarily. So we have to cross the cyclists. We have to cross at the Washington, at the signalized on Washington Avenue.
Right.
So-
Maybe I thought the signal was at the northern.
And the signal is at the northern, but we were going to another signal coordinated with that, with bicycle face.
Okay.
It has to be like that.
So, yeah, it's very intricate
Yes.
designs, both of these, and there were lots of comments from the attendees, including me. And I guess what I would say is that between now and when we see these plans, keep in mind that we should be looking for solutions maybe that are already out there and what other communities have encountered. And not just Freed, but keep your eyes open. Apparently there's an intersection in San Francisco, I can't remember where that was, where they attempted to do something similar and they had to redo it because parts of it didn't work. So that we're getting some really good information. It's going to take some iterations to get where we need to go. You know, keep your eyes out in the world as you travel for that sort of dual T intersection with, you know, a major street, multimodal transportation, and crossing for pedestrians and bicyclists.
It's exciting to have this project at last, you know, going and moving forward, because for some time I was like, when are we going to have this? When are we going to have it? So looking forward to it, looking forward to applying for Cycle 4 for construction, little by little.
Can you remind me the status of the other controversial element in that plan, which was moving the bus stop?
That is, well, we decided that we're going to treat that one separately. It is better to deal with this intersection of Solano and San Pablo in a separate way, because it's very political at this point, if you want to expand on that.
In short, it's not something we're actively working on right now. It is absolutely very important for effective transit service on San Pablo Avenue. But we.
So the current project will leave the bus stop on the south side?
Yeah, that intersection will only remove, the project will remove the split face on at the Solano-San Pablo intersection.
Will the other work that you referred to about the deeper dive by Caltrans, or whatever that dive is from Jack London to...
that is Alameda County. The Alameda County Transportation Commission is working on that. The Alameda County had, we met with them too, and they also raised the issue of the bus stop from the, relocating it from the near side to the far side. They also think that they could collect some data that will help us move forward with that proposal.
Okay.
So
That certainly seems like it's a proposal with regional impact, so it would be very helpful to have a regional body working on it.
they are trying to help too.
I think, though, that the study, the sky's the limit right now for what transit can do. I mean, you could look at median stations, I think, still in that study. I don't think they have it. There's no defined parameters yet for what the transit's going to look like.
Monorail,
No, it's
median, monorail above the median.
There you go.
Flying
BART.
buses?
Yeah.
no, it's not defined right now, but in the meantime, they're going to collect information.
Over the cars.
No.
Ariel, how
Don't go
about
around corners, yeah.
Wow.
Just put my hat on for AC Transit. We could look at that anytime. I know it's just controversial, right? So we have to just pick the right time to do it. But there's not a huge cost involved unless we do some sort of bulb out. But we can look at that anytime at AC Transit, at least.
Well, we can also have the nice parklet bus combination.
You could do that. Yeah.
Combination.
Yeah. But I think overall you're not looking at more than $50,000 worth of cost overall, and you can search for that money probably.
Except for the litigation.
It really is, more than anything else, is a question of finding the right time.
Yeah, I think
Take
so.
on the issue with policymakers. And it's something we hear about and we see every day as we walk down the street.
you
So
go out there.
it isn't, although we're not working on it right now, it's not not forgotten
Okay,
by any means.
fair enough. Anything else you need from us on 7-1?
No, just your ears and then your support. Questions were great, actually, and eventually in the spring you're going to be writing a letter of recommendation for the grant application. So
Great.
Mark Hurley was telling me, why don't you start writing it right now so we don't get into the rush? And I said, I don't even know if they changed the guidelines at this point.
7-2, brief report on Ford GoBike bike share program.
Also, you want me to do that, or you? Yeah. So Jeff and I met with Motivate, which is the operating company for the 4 GoBikes that MTC has a contract with. And we talked about the deployment of the first phase and second phase of jurisdictions who are interested in having the bike share system. And we expressed our interest. The city of El Cerrito was already also at the meeting, and we understand that Richmond and San Pablo, I think, submitted applications or letters of interest last year. We missed that opportunity, and but we are now going back to the table, to the drafting table, and letting MTC know that we are very interested. The person who's managing the program will get in touch with us about the next cycle. And as soon as we have the next cycle, we're going to meet with her and explore the opportunity to get into that program. So start thinking about potential locations. We do have some locations as well, but if you have better ideas, well, welcome.
That's not a cost to the city other than the space?
Well, we're trying to get a grant from MTC.
It would be, there is a
would be-
cost to
there is a
someone
cost,
to
yeah.
install the bike station. It's about 75,000.
75,000. But if we get a grant, that's included in the grant. Right now, if we don't get the grant, it's $75,000 for installation for the infrastructure and $100,000 if we get a sponsor.
I'm sorry, so it's $75,000 per station?
Yeah, for the, yeah.
Yeah.
For jurisdictions.
And what was the 100,000?
And if you have a rich friend or a company who would like to sponsor a site, it's $100,000.
They charge the sponsors more than they charge us.
For their logo,
Got it.
or what, or is that what you mean? Or,
Well, it's going to be Ford is the primary sponsor, but you could have a Ford GoBike station sponsored by Google or something.
to bring it to their area, okay.
There's also a threshold of number of trips per day. It's about, it should be 3 or more per day, per bike, I'm sorry, per day per bike. So if that's the case, we save the O&M costs. If you get less than that, then the city has to pay the O&M cost. That's how I understand it and the information I got.
What are the northernmost stations now? How far north do you go?
In Berkeley, isn't it?
Yeah, they're in Berkeley, but
North
how
Berkeley.
far?
First Avenue, I think, is the
Is
farthest.
that the furthest near campus?
Yeah.
But it doesn't come to Northwest Berkeley, like it doesn't come to the part of Berkeley that's near Albany.
Right, I don't think it does.
So if we're considering where we would want to expand, would we then assume that the
Right.
northwest part of Berkeley, and in particular the North Berkeley BART station, are
You'd almost certainly want to have a contiguous
Right.
system. There's already in
Works.
Oakland and Emeryville and Berkeley, plenty of stations and more since they finished the current phase. But again, for usefulness, you don't
Right.
want to have a bunch of separate islanded systems. You want one contiguous system.
Yeah. Also, they were saying that sometimes they don't like they don't really encourage near bar or at bar stations. Is that what I mean? If I remember correctly, remember what they said about that?
Have them.
They have to.
Yeah. They look for them on about a quarter-mile grids.
Oh yeah.
They want them in a consistent pattern so that the user kind of gets to the notion that wherever they are, they're only a quarter mile, or wherever they want to go, they're only about a quarter mile away from a station.
and even if they can't use their preferred station because it's empty or full,
Exactly.
effectively, then they can use the next.
And apparently the app will tell you where a bike is or where an open.
So if we're thinking of joining this, does that mean that Berkeley would also be expanding Berkeley's part of the system to meet us at
Yeah,
our
right.
south?
I think we would push for that. We certainly have in Berkeley plenty of people who are interested in expansion to North Berkeley. I think really the only part of Berkeley right now that's not a candidate for expansion is the hills.
Oh yeah.
'Cause be really hard to
They-
operate a
they're
system.
not
there.
electric.
They're not electric, and so
100
all the bikes
pounds.
would make one-way trips downhill, mostly.
UC Village is a candidate for us, the development, isn't it, Jeff? That's what we're thinking.
That's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, we had them leave the space for that.
Do we know how it's going? How's the use compared to what they projected? Is it doing okay?
Pretty good so far.
Yeah?
How long have you had the station?
6
Since
months?
July.
Or less, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, well,
Do we know if Richmond is interested? Because
Richmond is, I think Richmond
more neighboring cities.
Yeah, Richmond submitted a letter of interest last year.
Great. It's good to hear. I read somewhere that they require an exclusive relationship with the cities. Is that true? Are you allowed to have other bike share systems?
Well, MTC and the grant is associated with Motivate and for GoBikes. If that's the vendor that they're using, and they have a
understand.
contract already, a master contract with them.
I guess my question is, there's some other bike share systems operating out there, and to me, could be kind of distracting if there are multiple bike shares. But from a practical and contractual standpoint, if we sign up with the Ford GoBike system, does that preclude hosting other types of bike shares in our community?
We didn't get to that level of discussion with them.
I know that Berkeley's franchise agreement includes the exclusive rights clause that extended also to e-bikes, provided that they put forth an e-bike option within a certain time frame. I forget, like 3 years, something like that. So they're currently working on that. But the whole franchise agreement is, I believe, for 10 years. So if at the end of that time we felt like it's not working, then we'd be open to work with other possible providers. I know that right now one of the models that periodically pops up is stationless bike share. A couple of, just come drop bikes out on
Leave your
the
bikes
street.
on the park.
Entirely aside from the franchise agreement, I have serious concerns about
Yeah.
sprinkling bikes all over, and who knows where they end up.
Well, Oregon had an experience with, is that a yellow bike that they had about 10 years ago?
Probably. And there's all sorts of horror stories about
Yeah.
these sorts of things in China,
Oh, yeah.
where there's
Piles of bikes.
just bikes. So I think our greater concern would be, a few bikes left just across the middle of the sidewalk, blocking the
path
of travel for people, or in people's front yards where it just seems a little too sloppy for all that. You don't have to give up those, critical parking spaces or sidewalk space. I think you get something for that investment of space.
But I think one concern would be if we end up in an awkward situation where, say, Berkeley has extended their system to near Albany's border on the south, while El Cerrito has signed up with a different vendor and a different model altogether. And then it sounds like we can't really join both of those. We would have to pick one or the other.
I think that, and maybe this needs to be a full agenda item before too much more discussion, but the idea is the MTC is going to provide funding, a financial incentive to have a region-wide system.
Right.
So that's our carrot, perhaps.
Part of this was that MTC, for this initial launch, provided a full-time staff person to each of Oakland, Emeryville, and Berkeley to work on this. So it's far from a trivial undertaking. I mean, you got to do all kinds of outreach to locate the stations, figure out where you want them, then deal with the adjacent businesses, be sure it's okay. Just like trying to move a bus stop to the far side, some issues come up.
So it's reasonable to expect a certain contractual relationship.
I think so.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Great.
Which also makes it more likely that if MTC is involved, it'll be the same operator to the north of us as to the south of us.
Right.
I guess the speculation I had heard is that in some of these cities farther north, the population density is not enough to support the Ford GoBike model, and that another model might be applicable. And that would leave us in the awkward middle child.
We're on the edge.
All right. Future agenda items?
Unless you want to add something, maybe you want to add, I don't know, what the public comment
Public comment, yeah.
was today.
Do we want to cover the initial public comment?
Yeah.
in
Well,
a-
I'd like to know, of the three things that were mentioned, but one was the beacon, one was coordinating the crossing guards, and one was additional police presence to deter speeding on Marin Avenue. Are all three of those within this commission's purview? I mean, we don't talk about crossing guards normally. Is that something that we would agendize, or if we wanted to recommend it, would we recommend it to some other body, or?
I think with the crossing guards issue, let me check with the city manager on that. At this point in time, I think it's at the council level. It's been brought to the council's attention, but I'll double check that.
There may be no need for us to, if all we want to say is, yes, please fix the crossing guard problem, then
Yeah, I'm not sure that.
we might not need to agendize.
I think everybody wants to try to fix the problem. It's just working out
Details.
the details of sharing responsibility.
But the beacon sounds like it would be our,
The beacon would definitely be something that you could take into consideration. And then with respect to police enforcement, as you were discussing earlier, having the representative of the police department here at a future meeting, that would be a natural question.
And then I had the third being the after-dark street lamps, but that was addressed already by Mark.
For this particular area,
Lighting was
yes.
in that scope, so that one. But, so it would be the pedestrian beacon that we would need to understand what the warrants are if we put it on a agenda item, correct?
I think we will get the warrants. I mean, if we got them by Marine and Curtis,
Okay.
the warrants will be met here.
I don't know how to address this, but there seem to be a number of communication issues and some, it sounded like some frustration around, or miscommunication around the current situation reflected in the comments in the letter. And I don't know how to help. I don't know how this group helps.
Or the coordination, you mean?
It helps, communicate or, improve communication. I'm not sure that's something we can
I think
address.
there's an expectation that we see different times from this commission. I'm sure they see it more, well, on City Hall or City Council of how we actually work. And there's somewhat of a disconnect on that. And I don't know, I'm not sure how to correct that.
Yeah, I think it's out of our scope.
Maybe it's more administration and how we can communication.
There are a lot of, this particular case it came up, I think, relatively quickly, but, a lot of cases, we try to sit down with people and just talk through issues and not explain to them the city's process and when it's appropriate to bring it to Traffic and Safety Commission and a little context so that their comments are a little bit more on point and it's more kind of focused on a policy decision if we should do this or we should do that. In this case, like I say, I think it came together pretty quickly. So, it's good that they wanted to communicate with the city, and we'll circle back with them and maybe spend some more time, so that the discussion that comes to you is more productive. As an example, Loleta and I spent some time yesterday evening, with some of the North Albany residents about the improvements in their neighborhood, and that's it's number one on future agenda items. We kind of talked about what the history of the decision-making process is and how they can best advocate for what they want. And so you'll be hearing about that probably next month.
I guess I didn't know you did that so often, so I have to commend you because I think you do a pretty good job of it. Because I would think that we would hear more of what we hear than we do, but, so, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So the issue that we were discussing, I believe, was should we put
Oh.
Cornell School Marin flashing beacon crossing on the agenda? for the future?
Yes, we were discussing that. I thought we were going to ask for that. Do we need to
I
agree?
didn't hear a conclusion, but, you know, you're the chair, so.
I'm the chair. I
You
would,
can take care of that right now.
yes, I would like to put that on the list for a future agenda item. Any other future agenda item?
Are we going to get an update on the Buchanan Park and Ride? I
Oh,
think they're
yeah.
at what,
Oh,
65
yeah.
design? 65%?
When we get one.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the dark right now. too.
Hopefully you'll have a picture that actually reflects what the people said to you at the meeting.
It's asking too much.
And what about the mini park, the AC Transit stop? What's the
Parklet.
timing?
They're starting
The
construction
No,
imminently,
that-
right?
That's, we're going to have a meeting on that next week. It's going to start soon.
Yeah, really soon.
Oh, great,
It's funded and the
Right.
construction is going to start. Is that what you're saying?
great. Any other announcements or comments?
I just realized I had a twofer. I rode the cycle track in the middle of Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington DC on a bike share bike. Sorry.
There you go. Then it's time to adjourn. Our next meeting's October 26th. And it's 9:07 or 8. Wow.
Those bike share bikes.